Hello everyone, welcome to Game-Based Instruction. I'm Phil Truthaway. In this class we're going to look at the question, how can we teach through games? Now the purpose of this course is to prepare educators to implement game-based instruction into their classrooms. I'm going to teach you tools that I want you to be able to use in your classrooms wherever those may be. To accomplish that, we're going to focus on 3 learning objectives. The first, I would like you to be able to justify the use of game-based learning using educational theories. Okay, if we cannot justify the use of a tool, we shouldn't use it. So this should come as common sense. First and foremost, we have to be able to justify why we want to bring games into our classroom. Then, I would like you to be able to evaluate the potential of a game to help students meet learning objectives. Okay, there are a lot of games out there, and we have to evaluate which ones help us meet our learning objectives and which ones are just fun for students to play. And third, I would like you to be able to create a game designed to help students learn. Sometimes we can't find the perfect game, and sometimes you might want to create your own game that's very specific to what your students are learning. And I want to help you do that with this course. So next, I took these learning objectives and I split them into weekly goals to help build our course. So I thought I'd show you these before we went over the course calendar. Now, in order to justify the use of game-based learning using educational theories, first, we should be able to define game-based learning. We'll learn about that in week 1. After week 2, we should be able to describe how students learn through play. In week 3, we should be able to explain how games motivate potential learners. To evaluate the potential of a game to help students meet those learning objectives. We're going to learn to identify a game's type, genre, and the number of players. To determine the ways in which a player interacts with a game. How to judge whether gameplay interactions align with learning objectives, and how to evaluate if the progression of a game is appropriate for potential learners. And our final objective, to create a game designed to help students learn, we're going to learn about the ADDIE and user experience design models, how to produce a list of stakeholders' needs and design constraints, how to create a game design document. We're going to learn about identifying possible game development tools, how to develop an educational game prototype, how to test an educational game prototype, and finally, how to assess whether learning has taken place from game-based learning. Okay, so these are our weekly goals, things that I would like you to be able to do after each week. As far as grading, how I'm going to check if you meet that, there will be 10 discussion posts, and then there will be 4 projects. Okay, we're going to do a mock grant application. We're going to investigate a game and do a write-up. You're going to develop your own game prototype. And we'll finish with a small research proposal at the end. Okay, knowing our weekly goals and all the projects, here is what our calendar looks like. Okay, pretty much every week you're going to have a discussion or a project due, so just try to keep in mind of that. The second half of the calendar is here. This is all available online, by the way. Spring break will be in week 10 there. We won't have a final for this course. It'll just be projects and discussions, so a little lighter on that final week there. Okay, now that we've got some of that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into the content. So starting off, well, what is game-based learning? Well, there's a lot of definitions out there, but I'd like to keep things really simple in this course. So we'll define game-based learning as when educators use games to facilitate learning. Well, what are games? Games are a form of play or sport, especially a competitive one, played according to rules and decided by skill, strength, or luck. Okay, I really like this definition of a game from Oxford Languages here. because it really kind of breaks down the aspects we're looking for. A game should be a form of play. Right? To play is to have fun with something. So right away, games should be fun. Right? We're trying to bring fun into the classroom. But games are also competitive. So they can be very serious. So yes, we're having fun, but we can also be serious about our learning. Another important factor, games have rules. Okay, we're going to have to communicate these rules to our students to ensure they understand the game and how to play it. And hopefully, they will have the skills to succeed in this game. And if those skills line up with the skills we want them to learn, guess what? By just playing this game, you are learning. Okay, so that's kind of the idea here. Okay, now that we have a definition of game-based learning, we can take a look at some similar instructional strategies. Things like gamification, playful learning, and how those stack up to game-based learning. Now, these strategies are so similar that the very first thing Plass and friends did in their book, Handbook of Game-Based Learning, was outline the three and talk about the differences. Okay, a lot of times people might confuse gamification and game-based learning. I've definitely seen some definitions on the internet for game-based learning that are actually more gamification. So let's kind of take a look at these three. So in gamification, the learning activity is usually unchanged. We are adding in game-like features, but they're mostly extrinsic rewards. Okay, so gamification is things like gamified worksheets. Maybe you're trying to get the most points by completing the worksheet fast, or there's a leaderboard, or you get a badge as a reward for passing this worksheet, or it answers a riddle at the end. Okay, we used to use these all the time in math classes. It would be a series of math problems, and if you solve them correctly, it solves a puzzle, or gives a riddle, or shows a picture. Okay, at the end of the day, students are still just solving math problems. The activity hasn't changed, but that gamification aspect might get us a little more buy-in, right? That extrinsic motivation. And we'll talk more about motivation in week 3. As far as playful learning, our learning activity is now redesigned. We want the activity to be relevant, meaningful, and interesting. Right? It should make sense in the real world. Kids should want to learn about it. They should want to play with the activity. Okay, so now we're hitting intrinsic rewards. Okay, the student should want to play with the activity because it's interesting, not to score the most points. So an example of playful learning is maybe simulations with playful feedback. And then finally, game-based learning. We're redesigning our learning activities. Now we're using the full range of gaming features, both intrinsic and extrinsic. And we are using a learning game at the center of instruction. Okay, so these are 3 very kind of similar ideas where in gamification, we're trying to make the class activity more game-like. Right? You're getting points, there's a leaderboard, there's badges, it's fun, but at the end of the day, the learning activity is still the same. In playful learning, we're playing around with something that might teach us something, but maybe there's not as much rules, there's not points, there's not a winner as much in playful learning. But game-based learning, we have all of it. We have the rules, we have the play. Okay, we're using that full range of features. In addition to that, there's a host of other instructional strategies. Okay, maybe you've heard of problem-based learning, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, or discovery learning. Okay, this is where my brain went when I thought of similar instructional strategies to game-based learning. In game-based learning, we focus on a game to deliver instruction. Well, similarly, in problem-based learning, we're solving an open-ended problem as part of our instruction. Okay, in project-based learning, we are completing a large project to learn about a subject. Or in inquiry-based learning, the focus is on student curiosity. What do you want to know about this situation, this subject? Or discovery learning, it's about the exploration and discovering new ideas. Okay, once again, these are all similar to game-based learning, where we're bringing in this new element to be the core of our instruction, to facilitate learning. Whether it's a problem, a project, a question. Okay, let's look at some examples of these. Well, problem-based learning, this is the engineering design process. If anyone's ever taught engineering, you start with the problem and you go from there. Okay, so a lot of use there. Project-based learning, things like presentations and reports. Or by building that presentation, you're building your knowledge. Okay, you build it as you go. With inquiry-based learning, scientific method is a great example of this. Right, students ask a question, they form a hypothesis, and then they investigate. That's inquiry-based learning. And then finally, discovery learning might be case studies or science experiments, that sort of thing. Okay, so we have all these similar instructional strategies. You guys probably recognize some of these if you've been teaching, right? These are very popular. These are on a lot of people's lists of best practices. And I think there's a reason why for that. There's a lot of commonalities between both these and game-based learning, and I think that's why game-based learning is important. Oh, I should note that these are not mutually exclusive. You can absolutely do game-based learning and problem-based learning, or project-based learning alongside inquiry-based learning, okay? This is not a one-size-fits-all type of deal. Okay, you can adapt as you see fit. All right, let's look at some of the commonalities here between these learning types. First and foremost, all of these learning types that we've talked about have student-centered learning, right? They put learning in the hands of the student. What does this mean? There's an emphasis on the student instead of on the teacher. Students are learning by doing. The materials are adapted based on students' needs, and students' interests, progression, and voice are considered. Okay, that's why we're looking to these tools. We want to bring in student interest with a unique problem or project or game. Right? That is the goal. Okay, next, engagement. All these strategies are supposed to be more engaging than typical direct instruction if they're done correctly. Well, how come? Well, they have real-world relevance. Students get to actively participate. Okay, they're not passive learners just watching the teacher. They get to be doing something in all these strategies. Students have increased autonomy. Okay, they get to be their own boss, decide how they're doing things. All these strategies are fun. They all involve collaboration, right? Working with your peers. That should increase engagement. And finally, they add competition. Okay, so all of these strategies, project-based learning, game-based learning, the goal is to increase buy-in, to increase student engagement, to make students want to learn. And these are kind of the tools on how we can do that, right? Well, let's make the classroom fun. Maybe then they'll pay attention. Okay, what if we bring in a real-world problem? What if we let students collaborate with their friends? Right? These are all strategies to try to increase that engagement, get more buy-in. And game-based learning is no different. This is great. This is exactly what we're looking for with our game-based learning. Another commonality, 21st century learning. Okay, maybe you've heard of the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Okay, life and career skills, information and technology skills. All these things are important in being a fully functional adult, a fully functional working professional, but they don't always come up in the math curriculum or the English curriculum. So a lot of emphasis is being placed on those skills themselves. Okay, and a lot of times they refer to that as 21st century learning. Well, students, when they're working on projects, when they're working on problems, when they're playing games with their peers, they get to practice these 21st century learning skills. Okay, so by changing the vehicle of instruction to something more student-centered, now we're getting more of these additional skills, these 21st century skills, to help students learn how to be better people. Not so much how to be better at math, but just be better people in general. In addition to that, social emotional learning occurs in all of these project types, where students are building that self-awareness and self-management, or social awareness and relationship skills. Okay, so these strategies are great. These student-centered strategies are great because they add to what students learn. They're not just learning content. They're also learning how to work in groups, how to work as a team, how to work on a long-term project, things like that. Okay, so to bring all that together, if we ask the question, why game-based learning? Well, it's a student-centered approach. It should increase engagement. It incorporates both 21st century learning and social emotional learning. Next, let's talk about the types of experiences that you might have in game-based learning. Okay, Plass and friends, they put this into 4 categories in their book. They talked about games that prepare for future learning, games where students learn new knowledge and skills, games where students practice and reinforce existing knowledge and skills, and games where students develop learning and innovation skills. Okay, so let's go through this list again. Preparing for future learning. So in this scenario, students go through a game, so that way when they get to class later, the teacher can call on that student to remember that experience. Okay, the game is the connection that we're going to connect the learning to. On the flip side of that, sometimes games can introduce content. So the idea where students learn knowledge and skills from a game is when the game is actually teaching them something they didn't know before. Okay, practicing and reinforcing, right? They're practicing skills. You might already know a skill, and the game might ask you to use that skill to play the game. And now we're both practicing and playing a game at the same time. And finally, developing learning and innovation skills. Plass and friends didn't get too deep into this idea, but I think what they're going for here is these are the 21st century and SEL skills. These are the teamwork skills, the strategic thinking. These are the working in groups and communication and collaboration, things like that. So now I'd like to take a look at some games, some examples of games that might be used in these different scenarios. As far as preparing for future learning, our goal as instructors should be to create a unique experience for students that they can connect to when we're teaching our content. Okay, I know when I grew up, I played the Oregon Trail. Well, this game is great if you're going to teach a unit on westward expansion. Right? Students get to experience moving their family 2,000 miles across the Oregon Trail. And then in class, you get to draw on that experience and the sacrifices those students made while playing this game. Okay, so a great educational game. Gazillionaire. In this game, students get to be the captain of a spaceship. And the spaceship travels from planet to planet buying and selling goods. You can also play the stock market. Okay, this game is a wonderful introduction to entrepreneurship and would make an awesome experience if you wanted to talk about, let's say, supply and demand. Right? You can see here, this picture was someone bragging about buying one of the more expensive goods for the minimum price and selling it for the maximum price. They've figured out supply and demand. So they posted this on the internet to brag about it, right? So this game would be a great option for game-based learning. Okay, side note, in high school, my economics teacher asked us to play this game in class. He put us in groups. He introduced us to the game. I enjoyed it so much, I went home and bought the game and played it all weekend. And the rest of the unit, it became all the other groups versus my group because they thought I had violated the sanctity of the game. But a really great time for me. I learned a lot and I got really into it. I was super engaged, and I think it's a great example of how game-based learning might work. Another example, Spore. Okay, maybe you want to teach about evolution. Okay, it's hard for students to experience evolution in the real world, right? It's very slow. But in a game, they can go from the cell phase to the developed creature phase in a few hours. And now you have this wonderful experience where students actually got to take part in the evolutionary process. And you can draw upon that in the classroom. Another example, Papers, Please. Okay. Maybe you're going into a unit about the difficulties of immigration. What better way than to have your students experience what it's like to be working at a checkpoint to decide who gets into your country and who does not? Okay, this game puts students in that position where they have to make difficult choices. They have a set of rules on who to let in and who not to let in, and just the difficulties that'll lie there. I think it'd be a great intro to a unit on immigration. And finally, our last preparing for future learning example is This War of Mine. Okay, this is a really wonderful game. It's a game where students would have to survive a civil war as a civilian. Okay, this game is not about being the big bad guy that beats everybody up. This game is about the person at the bottom in war and how they're just fighting to survive. And I think this game gives a lot of truly great experiences that humbled me a lot. I really enjoyed this game. And it'll put students in situations where they might not have even dreamed of. For example, sometimes children in this game come up to you and say, "Our mother's sick. Can we have your medicine?" And you have to decide, do I give my medicine away to children or do I keep it for my people? Right? And those difficult decisions are not something that a student can get out of a textbook, I think. But this game does a really good job of bringing it to life. And then you can talk about that in class and talk about the difficulties of being a civilian in an occupied country or being a civilian during a civil war and how horrible that is and how difficult. Well, now at least the student has something to draw upon, some kind of experience. Okay, now let's look at some games that students learn new knowledge and skills just by playing. Okay, my first example is a great one, Kerbal Space Program. In this game, students get to be NASA, essentially. Okay, they have to build rockets, they get funding, and they get different missions to go to different planets. But you have the whole design phase, from building the rocket, to testing it, to launching it, to orbiting the Earth, to figuring out how to escape the Earth's orbit and land on different planets. It's very in-depth, it's very detailed, and students have to learn a lot about physics and engineering and astronomy just to play. Just to be successful, you have to know a lot of skills. So it's a great example, I think, of learning those new knowledge and skills while you're playing. Another example, Variant Limits. This game was really designed with an educational focus, and its goal is to teach its users calculus. Right? By going through this game and trying to solve the puzzle they have, you're learning calculus concepts. Okay, another example, Planet Zoo. This is a game where students get to manage their own zoo. Okay, imagine how much you're learning about animals and their habitats and their needs by just playing this game. Be a wonderful addition to a biology class. On that same note, Farming Simulator. Okay, what better way to learn about agriculture then go plant, go harvest, go run a farm, go learn what it takes, learn the machinery you need, right? All that's available in games. And finally, how about learning language? Well, games are also doing that, right? We always talk about learning language and using it in a real world context. Well, what if you're in a game? You can make whatever real world context you like. You can introduce the content and then put them in a situation where they need to use that language. Okay, and there's all sorts of extensions to these language games. A lot of them are using virtual reality to really put the student in that world. So I think there's a lot of exciting language learning opportunities that are coming our way. Next, let's look at some games where we're practicing and reinforcing knowledge and skills. Okay, and I don't want to just focus on video games in this class. So let's pick something a little more generic. How about dodgeball? Okay, in dodgeball, we're practicing throwing, we're practicing our lateral movement, and we're practicing jumping. Okay, as well as a host of teamwork and SEL skills and all of that. Okay, there's a reason that physical education classes have been playing dodgeball for so long. It's fun, it's engaging, it's competitive, and they're practicing and reinforcing skills that they want those students to learn. Another example, Scrabble. Okay, in Scrabble, you're practicing your vocabulary knowledge and the skill of spelling. Another example, how about card games? Go Fish. This might be something that's useful for the younger kids or the younger students. But what do you have to do in Go Fish? You have to identify numbers 1 through 10, both verbally and visually. Okay, you're practicing taking turns. Okay, it's very good for young people. Very good game. Another example, Mavis Beacon. Okay, I don't know how you guys learned how to type, but I learned through a further system than this. But Mavis Beacon has been teaching typing using game-based learning since 1987. Okay, and what they do in this program is they give you a lesson, they teach you different parts of the keyboard, and then eventually you get to a game where you get to practice. And what a great way to practice your typing ability than to drive a race car. I remember as a kid, we would type a word and the penguin would jump from one iceberg to the next, right? Well, these are fun ways to practice our typing ability. Another example from my childhood here, Treasure Math Storm. Okay, this is a very interesting Christmas math hybrid, where you do things like you use the nets you have to catch an elf, and then to catch that elf you have to solve a math problem. Or there's a phase in the game where you have to tell time correctly in order to pass that level, right? So we're practicing math concepts. Like to succeed in the game, you have to practice the skills that we want those students already practicing. So you can see how these go kind of hand in hand. And finally, we can talk about some experiences that develop 21st century and SEL skills. Okay, to me, this is in every game. You can find one of these skills, but let's talk about some major ones. Chess, for example, has been used to teach strategic thinking for generations. Okay, Democracy is a computer series where students get to try to get elected to office and try to hold office by passing different laws, right? It's a government simulator. Well, there's absolutely a ton of strategic thinking that students will develop by playing this. Strategies on how to play the game of politics and how to win your voters over, things like that. Soccer. Think of all the teamwork skills that go on in soccer. Okay, all the collaboration, the communication. Like team sports is an amazing way to learn SEL skills, and I think probably the best way as a football coach. I've always thought, why am I teaching SEL in the classroom? Let's teach it on the field. And I think game-based learning is a nice bridge to that. Another example, the game of telephone. Okay, where you whisper a word in someone's ear and then it goes around the circle and then the last person says the phrase or the word, and you see how close it is. Well, this is a game of communication, right? This is a game where people practice saying things very clearly. They practice listening intently. Telephone is a game of communication. It's absolutely a 21st century / SEL skill. And to continue that idea, what if we took that up a notch? What if we added some more fun to that idea of communication? Okay, the game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes involves a diffuser talking with experts on how to solve a bomb. And they have to refer to a manual. And the diffuser has to give the experts information about the bomb. Okay, so that's two-way communication in the form of a game. But you have to practice those communication skills, those collaboration skills to be successful here. Okay, in closing, here are the big ideas of today that I'm hoping you come away with. The first is that game-based learning is when educators use games to facilitate learning. Okay, we're going to keep that definition nice and open. We're using games to drive learning. It's student-centered, and we hope to increase engagement, right? If we're doing game-based learning right, students should be excited about the game. They should be eager to play. We can use those games in a variety of ways. Okay, we talked about we can prepare for future learning. We can learn new knowledge and skills. We can practice skills that we already have. And finally, we can work on those non-content skills, right? The 21st century learning and the SEL skills. Okay, so that's all I have for you this week. There is a discussion that I will show you in a sec here. Next week, we will hope to get into how learning is taking place in game-based learning and the mechanics and the theories that drive that. Okay, I just wanted to finish off this video by taking a look at our online course structure to just try to clear this up for everyone. So this is the home page for our course, which should look very familiar if you've ever taken a class with Dr. Lou. There are 3 links at the top: a syllabus page, a learning materials page, and an assignment submission page. The syllabus page has a link to the syllabus, as well as a quick picture of the course calendar and grading. The learning materials page quickly shows you the instructions for each week. We'll talk about week 1 here at the end. The assignment submission page just gives you quick links to all the assignments that are due each week. And if we go back to our home page here, okay, other things of note, there will be office hours for this course, 4 to 5 p.m. on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So feel free to pop into this link if you have any questions about the course content, the assignments, or if you just want to talk about game-based learning or check in. There's also a Meet the Instructor page. In case you're curious about me or my background, you can read that. As far as week 1, things that you should have done to finish this week, please complete the pre-course survey so I kind of have an idea of what learners are taking this course. You are about to finish watching the week 1 instructional video, so great job there. When you have time, take a look at that syllabus. There's also a link here on how game-based learning develops real-world skills. So I think this is an interesting read along with a little video. So you can take a look at that before going into discussion 1. Okay, so this is our first assignment, our week 1 discussion. The prompt is, have you ever encountered game-based learning in your life? Share a real-world experience you have with game-based learning. This can be lessons learned or not learned from a board game, card game, sports team, video game, or any other game. Okay, now specifically, what am I looking for? I would like to know, what was your role in the experience? What was the game? Along with a brief description. I want to know what that game taught or failed to teach. I would like to know if learners are engaged or were engaged while playing the game. I'd like to know if the learner had fun in the experience. And I'd also like to know if there was competition. Okay, so hopefully you can see how these ties to the day's ideas, right? Our content today. All of our discussion posts will be like this. I will give you 6 items I'm looking for. This is your first 6 points. Your 7th point is to submit this initial post on time. So if you guys could all address these topics by Friday, then that gives everyone a chance to reply to 2 of our peers' posts by next Monday. Okay, so this is the goal. You're going to write a prompt or a post discussing these 6 ideas. And then you're going to respond to 2 of your peers' discussion posts. Okay, if you have any questions at all on this or anything else, please pop into the office hours. But that is week 1, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.